Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the recap and review of NCIS Season 16, Episode 20, Hail and Farewell. We start out with Bishop and McGee in an online waiting room, and they're trying to get Comic-Con tickets, and they're really excited because George Lucas is like the secret guest. Torres walks in and says he has no idea who George Lucas is. Before we can figure out how that's possible, Gibbs comes in and says they have a dead body at a construction site. When Gibbs sees the body, he figures out that she's been dead for at least 18 years because she has no global war on terror ribbons. While Palmer is performing the autopsy, he starts talking to the body and telling it stories and just slowly but surely anamorphing into Ducky. He tells Gibbs that he was able to identify the woman as Major Ellen Wallace. He also reveals that she was killed by a fatal blow to the back of the head and not in the September 11th attacks as what had been previously thought. We then get a flashback of old school early 2000s Gibbs, who's watching the newscast that reported her death. In the squad room, Bishop is about to sell her soul for some Comic-Con badges, but McGee rushes in the nick of time and tells her that Delilah was able to secure 3 badges. McGee and Bishop then share this high five, handshake situation. I don't know what to call it. It looks like they're about to hit each other in the face, but it's cute. It's very cute. Gibbs interrupts them and they tell him that they know she wasn't murdered in the building, but they still don't know exactly where she was killed. This episode, it's Gibbs' turn to go full swan, and he storms out and tells them to do their jobs. Bishop and McGee meet with a woman who says she saw Major Wallace at a hail and farewell dinner the night before her death. She says that she left early and seemed pretty distracted. She also says that she knows Wallace had a pretty complicated relationship with an ex-fiancé. I wonder who that could be. Gibbs then goes to talk to Ellen's father, who is legendary Army General James Wallace. On his way, Gibbs talks to General Daniel Kent, who says he brought General Wallace on to be a guest lecturer at the academy years ago and considers him to be family. In the classroom, they have this conversation about rules, which has been quite the hot topic this season. Wallace says he regrets his last meeting with his daughter, or the lack thereof, and tells Gibbs he needs to find who did this. In the next scene, Bishop talks about Marie Kondoing some messy containers. Just in case you forgot you were watching this in 2019, Casey tells Bishop you can tell a lot about a person based on what they leave behind. And if you think I'll be overanalyzing this line later, you're right. In the bin, they find a Polaroid of Gibbs and Ellen from the night of their engagement, confirming that Gibbs was indeed her mystery fiancé. Seems to me like Gibbs might be personally involved in this case. Bishop is wondering how Gibbs wouldn't have told them this, and McGee's like, you know Gibbs, he never talks about his personal life. Which, yeah, is true, but usually when it's this involved in a case, I feel like he at least casually brings it up. There was that episode, I believe it's from season 7, where they had a case involving Shannon's mother, his former mother-in-law. He mentioned that right off the bat in that episode. So I don't know. I feel like this is something he would have mentioned. I digress. Torres is also flabbergasted to discover that he's had 4 wives, which hasn't he been working here 3 years? By now, I feel like this is something that would have come up. They decide they're not going to tell Gibbs that they know until he knows that they know that he knows. By the way, there's an entire episode of Friends about why this doesn't work. Gibbs walks in and tells McGee to go through Ellen's phone records to see who she talked to before she died. Casey then finds traces of Gibbs' blood on Ellen's uniform, meaning that they have to take him into interrogation, meaning that I'm viscerally uncomfortable. He picks up the chair and starts slicing the caps off the bottom with his pocket knife, which feels like something he definitely should not have been allowed to have in there, but whatever. Sloan takes one for the team and goes in to interrogate Gibbs. Gibbs says he never told them about his relation to Wallace because he didn't think it was relevant. I'd love to know his definition of relevant. It turns out the reason that his blood was on her uniform was because, in a flashback, he cuts himself on the boat and she, mops it up with her uniform sleeve. He says the last time that they spoke was 2 months prior to 9/11, to which McGee raises an eyebrow. Sloane slyly gets him to admit that he was the one who broke it off, which is the opposite of the way his relationships usually end. Sloane keeps asking him why she was so different, like why were things so different with her? I think it's because she was blonde. She starts to pry further into the history of their relationship, which, in his defense, does feel a little less case-related. This feels like something more at home at one of their drinking nights that they apparently have. Gibbs storms out of interrogation and McGee stops him and asks him why he lied, saying that he knows that Wallace called him the night before her death. Gibbs seems irritated that McGee confronts him with this. He's gonna be real pissed at whoever told McGee to check those phone records. Wait. Gibbs ignores him and continues walking away, and McGee tells him he's off the case. McGee goes to Sloane and is reasonably upset because he feels like Gibbs doesn't trust or respect him after 16 and a half years together. She reasons that if Gibbs didn't trust him, he wouldn't have left. After being incentivized by 3 Comic-Con badges from Torres, someone from DOD confirms that Ellen swiped in that night but never scanned out, which means she was killed by someone who was in the building with her and then her body was moved, which then means that Gibbs is cleared. McGee goes to talk to Gibbs in his basement, and he talks about how Gibbs keeps them all at a distance and like why after all these years, McGee is still with him. Why is he lying to him about this phone call? Gibbs admits that he didn't pick up her call that night. The way I'm describing it right now sounds very chill, but there was a lot of shouting and tool throwing and like shots through wood dust. It was a lot. He ignored the call thinking that she wanted to talk about their relationship, but in reality she was asking him for help. He says he regrets that he didn't help Ellen, and McGee tells him not to make the same mistake twice. Bishop and Torres talk to a journalist, and they figure out that Ellen was working with him on an investigation about a 1998 attack on Kosovo, which her father led. Gibbs confronts her father, the general, and they talk about the grief of losing a child. Ouch. Her father then says that Gibbs never deserved his daughter, and Gibbs agrees. Again, ow. The general then asks Gibbs why he called it off, and Gibbs says it's because he loved her, and that never turns out well. Which is depressing, but also weirdly true. Torres and Casey figure out that Kent served as an aide to General Wallace during Kosovo. A shadowy Gibbs then looms into interrogation. He picks up yet a different chair and starts slicing the caps off it again, which is cool and intimidating, and I get it, but someone's gonna start wondering where all these caps went. He almost immediately gets Kent to confess to killing Ellen. Afterwards, Palmer runs into the squad room and tells the team that he has 6 all-access badges to Comic-Con due to his connection to a relative of Stan Lee's. We're just figuring out all these secret relationships this episode. He has tickets for him and Brina, McGee and Delilah, and Torres and Bishop. Which is great. All 3 couples get to go. They talk about Gibbs in cosplay, which somehow makes me more viscerally uncomfortable. Gibbs attends Ellen's burial and McGee joins him. Gibbs says he regrets trying to do the right thing for her because she still ended up dead. McGee encourages him to walk up to the casket to say his final farewells, which Gibbs does. And that is hail and farewell. There were some elements of this episode that I'm not quite sure how I feel about, but I will say that it was a really, really fascinating episode for Gibbs. It just shows that after 16 years, 16 and a half years, there's still all this stuff that we're figuring out about him. And not only that, but he's still growing, which is fantastic because it would be so boring to just see him stagnate. And I really don't think he is. He's in such a vulnerable place that I can't remember seeing him in for a really long time. It's just so interesting to see this man who is usually completely put together and collected and kind of stone-faced really dig into these complex emotions. I do find it a little odd that he didn't mention that was a fiance of his again, I digress. They cannot possibly talk about all of these plot points in the 4 episodes we have left. So I'll be curious to see if and when they talk about this again. I think this also puts Gibbs in a really vulnerable position. I can't wait to see where this goes. Speaking of McGee, he's frustrated, which, you know, is understandable. I love seeing him kind of step up and really confront Gibbs and question him about his choices. I don't think I mentioned this, but he confronts him again about Rule 10 and like questions his decision to burn it. Like, I think he's just as taken aback by these changes, like this whole Gibbs evolution that's occurring right now. I think Gibbs's rules are just like such a constant that when they're taken away, like the whole earth moves. There's also that whole thing with McGee exploring new career options in the episodes coming up, which, you know, probably plays into his feelings within the team and towards Gibbs right now. I love how so many aspects of the plot are building on one another right now. There's been quite a few murder accusations flown around the squad room lately. There was Gibbs this episode and Torres and Bishop a couple episodes ago. Remember that? That definitely put a dent in their relationship. Is that conversation going to be triggered by something that happens in the finale arc? I like Casey and I hope we get to see more of her. You know, we've really only seen her on a surface level the second half of this season, so I'm really hoping we'll get a little bit deeper in the finale arc. Not that we don't already have 400 things to cover. There's something with her involving a cold case next episode that I'm wondering if that's going to open some doors for her character. I also like that in order to distinguish Torres from Tony, they're like, well, Tony loves movies, so let's just not have Torres know what a movie is. I really dig the flashback scenes with like Gibbs in his silvery marine cut hair days, and just even the way it was shot with like the soft focus just really reminded me of classic NCIS. I enjoyed those flashback scenes a lot. I wonder if we'll be getting more of those anytime soon. Perhaps in the finale arc? Rule number 10, or the lack thereof, has had a much bigger presence on the second half of this season than I anticipated. Like in She, when he burned it, I was like, oh, that's, you know, a big step for Gibbs, cool, like, but I didn't foresee it being such a huge element in so many of the episodes since then. I think actually in every single episode since then, one or more of the team members has been personally involved in the case, which is really fascinating and I love it. And I was talking about this before, and I know a lot of people have, that they've been really, you know, giving each character their own episode, and I think that's a way to play into the whole Rule 10 thing. Like there was the case with McGee, there was the case with Jimmy and his father-in-law, there was obviously the Sloan case, and then obviously the Bishop thing, you know, and now Gibbs with his fiance. It's just every single episode in some way, shape, or form has had the team members being personally involved, which, God, I love it. Let's talk about some of the lines in this episode. Some of the dialogue that piqued my interest. There were a handful of lines that I think kind of alluded to other things. Maybe I'm just crazy, I don't know. There was one line that Kent said where he was like, the general shouldn't have to suffer through the death of his daughter twice. And Gibbs was like, no one should. And they ended that moment on that line. It might just be talking about Kelly or how he has already lost so many daughter figures. But I also just thought it was interesting because in my last review I was talking about how I think Gibbs might kind of have an inkling that Ziva is alive, but it would be too painful for him to either think that and then be wrong and have to grieve her again, or for her to actually die and then have to actually grieve her. Wow, what a nightmare. I wonder if there's some significance in that line relating to future episodes. There was also a line in the classroom scene where the general was like, "Are you gonna let some handbook override your instincts?" Which, could it be referring to Gibbs's rules, to Gibbs's handbook? It's been pretty prominent, and I feel like dialogue is chosen for a reason. And so if they're gonna bring up a line like that, I just feel like it has to have some connection to rule number 10. There was also the line where it was like, you can learn a lot about someone based on what they leave behind. I just can't help but think of that cabin scene where it shows all the stuff that Ziva left behind, including her knife and her guns. There's a reason they showed us that, I think, in my opinion. It's just gonna be figuring out what that is. What other things did she leave behind in that room? You know, is there something that we're just all breezing by that's actually super significant? Speaking of the finale arc, let's talk a little bit about episodes 21 and 22 coming up. Judge, Jury is the one that deals with Casey and the cold case thing, and also McGee exploring a potential new job option. And then ... and Executioner talks about a secret government bank account that's been funding a nationwide network of vigilante justice. Wow, okay. Two things. One, when they introduced that plot line a couple episodes back, I was like, oh, this is probably going to be the primary focus of the finale arc. And it does seem like a primary focus. However, it seems like it's being investigated pretty early on in the arc, which leads me to believe we're gonna take a turn. We're gonna go somewhere else with the arc. Every time I say vigilante justice, I think of that episode with like the local superheroes that like Tony's fiance was investigating. I really hope it's not them. What an interesting callback. 2 episodes doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it's a pretty sizable amount of time for other plot lines. I think the vigilante justice storyline will lead somewhere else. There's just too much time left. Maybe Ziva runs the Vigilante Justice League. She did say she was giving up the badge, but to be fair, vigilantes don't have badges. But in actuality, I don't think she's involved in like the Vigilante Justice League. But I wonder if she is tied into that storyline somehow. Like, does something they're investigating lead them to Eli or Orly or Ziva herself? Or just, you know, does it relate to Gibbs and like he's in danger and then she has to come back and help him? She's really just gunning it from Paris or wherever she's been hiding. My ceiling theory, we remember? There weren't many overt Ziva mentions in this episode, but I wonder if some of those lines were alluding to it. We don't have a new episode next week, but then that's the last week off. From that point forward, it's 4 consecutive weeps. Foreshadowing. After that, it's 4 consecutive weeks for the final 4 episodes. I'm very intrigued to see which ones they'll explore, what'll be explored earlier on versus later, you know, if at all this season. All we can do at this point is wait and make some theories. What do you think about them exploring the bank account storyline so early? I think there might be a twist. I hope there's a twist. I say that now, but watch, I'll be like, no, take it back. With every episode, I'm getting more and more excited for the finale arc. So I really can't wait to see where it goes. Hello, it's me from the future. So I filmed this recap and review on Thursday, and since then, so many things have happened. Over the past few days, there's essentially been like a spoiler dump talking about the upcoming finale arc. As I was editing this video, I was like, there's no way I can't not talk about all of these spoilers that have just come out. So here we are. And so many things just keep happening that I really didn't even bother to make like real notes. I've just been keeping an ever-growing list of tabs. Let's start with episode titles. CBS announced that episode 23 is going to be entitled Lost Time. And they also released the press release. Let me just pull it up on my 47 tabs. I have open right now. It actually supports a couple of theories I've had so far. Shocking, I know. In the press release, it talks about the team is investigating a murder of a Marine sergeant. Like, it already seems a little distant from the vigilante crime hunting team that we've established is going to be earlier on in the finale arc, which supports the idea that we're taking a turn and focusing on something else in the following 2 episodes. Perhaps more importantly, it talks about the fact that Gibbs will be kind of spiraling a little bit, like unraveling is the term they used. He just kind of unravels while they're investigating this case and has to go to Dr. Grace. This sounds very like villainous of me, but I'm really excited to see that. Like, I'm sure it'll be heartbreaking, but I'm so excited to see them explore that. I've also been mentioning that I think Gibbs's vulnerability will play a pretty large role in the finale. And so this, I think, supports that that's at least in part true. The episode title itself, Lost Time, I think just has so many possibilities. Is Gibbs making up lost time? With who? For what? Is someone else making up lost time? Who? Why? Someone who hasn't been with her daughter in a long time? I don't get like a memory loss vibe with this, like making up lost time like in his brain. I don't get that vibe. To me it seems less literal, if that makes sense. You know, is it time he's lost to following his rules? Is it something he's missed out on in his life? The title is just so wonderfully vague. Let's talk about the finale title, or the alleged finale title, I guess. So IMDb posted that the finale title is Alternative Twilight. CBS has yet to confirm that, but they also just confirmed Lost Time today. Alternative Twilight wouldn't be until the week after, so I feel like if that is the title, they're not gonna confirm it until sometime next week. If that is the title, oh my god. For those of you who don't know, Twilight is the episode title of the season 2 finale, where Kate was shot in the head. So that's concerning. Whatever that episode title makes me feel, what makes me feel that feeling more is the fact that, according to TV Line, Diane is somehow involved in this episode? Question mark. It references appearances by Fornell and Diane. Also, for those of you who are unaware, Diane is dead. The way she was killed was pretty much the way that Kate was killed. The fact that the episode is allegedly called Alternative Twilight and references Diane in some capacity, I feel like that's connected. I mean, and then I'm not the first to wonder if that has something to do with Ziva, because obviously Kate's death was a catalyst for Ziva's introduction. If you go back and you watch Twilight Kill Ari Part 1 and 2, Gibbs is also kind of a mess there. He was uncharacteristically kind, just very in his own head and sad, and he felt so guilty, and it was a really tough time for him. So mentioning that arc in this current arc feels very appropriate. It's so interesting because arguably one of the most iconic scenes of NCIS thus far is from Twilight. It's, you know, that scene on the roof. Perhaps even more interesting to me is the fact that I think we've already kind of seen an alternative Twilight. In Life Before His Eyes, we saw what would have happened if Kate hadn't been shot on the roof. Then there was that other alternative Twilight where Diane got shot. Would this alternative be more of a retrospective, like Life Before His Eyes? Or would it be an alternative more in line with Diane's killing? Is it something that actually happens? Something else that this photo gallery from TV Line mentions is that a younger member of the NCIS family, it's a lot of quotes. Something else that this article mentions is that a younger member of the NCIS family lands in serious jeopardy. How young are we talking? Like 20s or 8? Or do we mean younger in the sense that they've been on the team a shorter period of time? Again, very vague. Not that I would expect anything less. It's May Sweeps. The fact that it's also talking about Diane and Fornell in this episode makes me wonder if it has to do with Emily. And Grace is also involved in the episode before, and you know that Grace and Emily kind of had that connection. If it is Emily, that's very interesting because I don't quite know how she would get brought into this, and I also don't know what this is. To me, really the only like clear plotline we had been given was the thing about the secret bank account, and now that it seems like that might be out of the way relatively early on, the last 2 episodes are just like a great big mystery to me in terms of solid plot. I also think it's fascinating that we already have all these storylines open and we're introducing more. The term NCIS family is also loaded. Like, what an interesting term. NCIS family just means a million things to me. It includes a million different characters. And like I said, the term younger itself is vague. Like, does it mean newer to the team or does it mean like physically a wee child? When I think child in relation to the NCIS family, I think Tolly. Bear with me, this might be a crazy theory, but if it is Tolly, what did she get brought into? How did she get involved in this? Does it tie in the Ziva storyline? Speaking of the Ziva storyline, that also got its own article from TV Line. The showrunners were basically just saying that they intend to keep bringing up the plot line, that they're not just like throwing her name into the wind for no reason. They intend to keep adding layers to it. They say that there is so much that could have happened since we've seen Ziva last, and they've just kind of been talking about that, all those possibilities. They also say that interesting things could happen even if she's not physically present. Which is true. I feel like they could still have a very interesting, ultimately fulfilling plotline without her physically being present. Would I still love to see her physically present? Absolutely. Just because I would cry like a little baby. And with the whole note thing, I think they have really introduced this communication line that doesn't involve, you know, being physically seen or heard. You know, it's just written like ghostly pen pals. They also didn't confirm or deny whether or not she'll be there, so that's still up in the air, in my opinion. I know everyone has their own opinion on how likely or unlikely they think that is, but for now, nothing has been confirmed. Another thing that I've been seeing, which I wholeheartedly disagree with, is the idea that they can't bring back Ziva without also bringing back Tony. Would I love to see both Tony and Ziva physically be on screen and make a return? Absolutely. Would I love to see Tony, Ziva, and Tali make a return? Hell yeah. But they're not attached at the hip. Like, Ziva is very capable of existing and being present independently. And it's not even like they can't reference Tony or Tali. Like, I'm just saying, Ziva could be standing at NCIS and be like, yes, Tony is home watching Tali in Paris. This article doesn't really negate or confirm any of the theories I had in regards to Ziva's storyline. It does make me lean towards some more than others. Before, I was leaning towards them resolving the Ziva plotline, by the end of the finale. Now I'm more so wondering if it'll be something that spills over into season 17. Will this finale be a good time? I don't know. Also, some photos from episodes 21 and 22 have been released. There's like a courtroom scene, it looks like. How much of that episode takes place in the courtroom? Unsure. There's also photos of McGee exploring his new tech at, I guess, this new job place that he's checking out. The And Executioner promo photos are a little less telling. You can see the Secretary of Defense and some photos of Bishop and Torres. I don't know if that's telling in the fact that maybe we'll dive a little bit further into some of the ups and downs they've had in their relationship this half of the season. I think the TV Line article also mentioned that rule number 10 plays a role in, I think, episode 23, if not also episode 24. I'm so fascinated by this whole rule number 10 thing and Gibbs questioning his rules and just his like general turmoil right now. What do you guys think is ahead for season 16, especially considering some of these new spoilers? Let me know some of your guys' theories for what's coming up, because at this point I just have a million different ideas and I'm not particularly confident about any of them. That's the takeaway from this video. I just don't know. I believe that's all for now. Let me know what you guys are thinking, and I will see you guys for Judge, Jury, ...